Welcome to the Really Know Your Customer podcast with your hosts, Betsy Westhafer and Tony Bodoh. Join Betsy and Tony as they dive in with highly successful C-suite leaders who have grown successful organizations by creating a laser focus on listening to their customers and building deep customer relationships. Now, it's time to join Betsy and Tony for the Really Know Your Customer show.
Well, we're back here, everyone, with another podcast, another Really Know Your Customer show. And today we've got a really interesting guest, and I'm going to let Betsy introduce him in a moment here. But we had an opportunity to sit down with him and talk with him before we got on the show. And there's a couple things that really stand out to me that I wanted to share and kind of get your feedback, Betsy, on this. If we've ever talked to anyone about the idea of human experience, Scott is that person. He has just really nailed it as far as how business is about people, fundamentally, whether that's the employee or the customer. And that really stood out in the conversation we had earlier with him. And I kind of want to get your thoughts. And what was your takeaway on that?
Oh, yeah, you nailed it, Tony. You know, we always talk about B2B, and it's really person to person. And we've talked about that in our book and how it really is people doing business with people. It's not a business doing business with a business, right? So Scott has just the ability to really tap into what's important, who's important as far as, you know, their team, their customers, what really, really matters. And I cannot wait to get into this conversation and go deeper into that.
And another thing that really struck me is this whole show is about really knowing your customer. And so he talked with us about this story a few years ago, I believe it was. They did the Swot Analysis, and they really dived in to try to understand what their customers really loved about them. And they had all these expectations of what it might be. But the number one thing was not necessarily the top of their list, and that was relationship and how responsive his team is to their customers. And so that really stood out. And he really had some interesting comments and insights around that and how that's actually changed how they, maybe not changed, but emphasized how they focus their business today.
Yeah. And what's so good about that is they didn't just assume they knew what they wanted, what their customer wanted. They went and asked and then open-mindedly listened to it and acted upon it, which is what, you know, it's what we try to tell all of our clients is, you know, don't make these decisions in a bubble and don't assume you know what your customers want.
Exactly. And then from that listening, it was also fascinating because he started talking about where the future of benefits management is going and how it's going to become, rather than from this B to B to C concept, it's going to become really B to C down the road. And he shared kind of some of his insights there and how they're preparing for that.
Without further ado, are so excited to welcome Scott McGohan from McGohan Brabender to the show today. Scott, how are you?
I'm doing good. You guys, you set that up very nicely. I have a reputation to live up to, I guess.
Yeah. Well, your reputation precedes you. Everybody knows what a brilliant culture you've built at McGohan Brabender. So we're really excited to have you here today. Can't wait to dive in and talk about some of these things that Tony and I were just discussing. So tell us a little bit, to get started, tell us a little bit about you, how you got into this business, where you're from. Just let us get to know a little bit about Scott McGohan.
Yeah, so I used to tell people what I do, and then what I love to do is talk about what I have. So this is what I have today. So I've got a wife. Her name's Lori. We've been married 32 years, and she's my best friend.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Got a daughter. Her name's Courtney. She's 30. Got two grandkids, Jackson and Ellison. Son-in-law named Jack. Son named Taylor. He is a filmmaker. Just got married in October. I've got a faith that's really important to me, and by the grace of God, I get to lead an incredible organization called McGohan Brabender.
Awesome. So tell us about McGohan Brabender. Tell us about your business.
Yeah, so we started. My father founded the company in 1972. It was called McGohan and Associates. He shared an assistant with another friend of his, so that it was like McGohan and a half of an associate. And then I started in 1988, and I think I might have been the seventh person in the building. And he had just an uncanny way of just loving and caring about people. And he kind of stepped into this business. Somebody asked him, a favor. Hey, can you look at my benefits? And he did it, and he told the customer, you're in great shape, and there's no problems here. And the guy wanted to pay him, And he came back and said, you can't pay me because your current consultant did a great job. Customers said, you should stay in this business and be in this business. And he's been in it ever since.
So tell us how that business from when you walked in the building as number 7 has evolved to where it is today.
Well, his mindset was pretty simple. Number one, it was like, hey, if you're going to come to McGohan Brabender and expect a big income, this isn't the place to be. If you want to see value grow, this is the place to be, because we're going to take your income that you want to make and we're going to invest that back into our customers. So we're going to invest back in people and strategies and technologies, and we're not going to put that money in our pocket. We're going to lean into our customers. Because he said it, most companies build a company for 10, milk it for 10, and bleed it for 10. And he said, hey, I want to build a business I can drive by decades from now and say that place is still going and they're still creating jobs and still growing families.
Oh, that's awesome. And what a phenomenal approach to looking at customers.
Mm-hmm.
Just constantly investing in your customers. That's a beautiful sentiment. Okay, so let's talk about your customers. Tell us in a description of your customers, how they show up for you and vice versa, how McGohan Brabender shows up for your customers, and just talk to us a little bit about how you view your customers and the commitment that you show for them.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we were taught earlier along is the fact that it's pretty simple. It's like 1 + 1 = 2. It is treat your employees the way you want your customers treated, and everything will work out fantastic.
Awesome.
And so that was probably the number 1 rule, is the fact that if we love our customers, we should love our employees. If we want to take care of our customers, we should take care of our employees. And so that was the mindset from the very beginning. So if we're smiling inside, then we're going to smile outside. If we're having fun inside, we're going to have fun outside.
Nice.
If we're smart and strategic inside, then we're going to be smart and strategic outside. And it's not that complicated.
Yeah. So thinking about that in your customers and how they feel, if you say, for example, you were sitting in a coffee shop and you overheard some customers talking about McGohan Brabender, what would be the thing that they could say where you'd say, yes, that's exactly what we want to hear our customers say?
Yeah, great question. And I think you alluded to that from the very beginning. Is number 1, boy, they call us back, they're responsive. We have a question, they lean in. Number 2 is we have 3 rules. Hopefully what they see is they see us giving back in the community. So supporting nonprofits and other organizations, that they would say, McGohan Brabender is a giving company. They're a responsive company. Their people are a delight to be around. They smile, they interact, they're smart. They are strategic, and they're unbiased. So they're not leaning. We tell our customers that we do not represent, we represent insurance companies, but our shareholders are our customers. That's who tells us whether we're doing a good job or a bad job. And I think for the most part, I would hope we would hear things like that back from our customer base.
Very good.
Excellent. So let's go back in time a bit, where you were telling us the story about the SWOT analysis that you had done, and the results kind of surprised you a little bit, and take us through that process. Like, what were you thinking before, what showed up, and maybe how that changed your focus or confirmed what you were doing already?
Yeah. So we, for probably 20 years, we never had a budget, right? We just didn't have one, which is kind of amazing. And we didn't have a strategic plan. We just kind of said, hey, let's just go serve our customers, and things worked out. As we started to get involved in aileron here in Dayton, we got a business advisor and said, hey, you guys probably need a strategic plan. At that point, we thought, we're really smart, we're strategic, we're innovative, and we had all these things we thought our customers would say. And during that SWOT analysis, they came back and said, well, your customers, they didn't say that was the number 1 thing why they do business with you. They said they do business with you because you call them back. And we thought, we thought we were going to get bigger, stronger words like get a thesaurus out and use big, long 50-cent words. And no, what we heard is you guys call us back. So, we were disappointed in one sense, and then we were actually enlightened by another. Because I think some companies can get really kind of exhausted on how smart they think they are.
Mm-hmm.
But when you ask a customer why they do business with you, and they tell you something simple like, you call me back, then internally your organization's number one value should be responsive, because it's what your customers are telling you what to do.
So it's fascinating because the name of the show, Really Know Your Customer, you actually went out there and had the courage to ask the question.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it didn't come back quite as expected, I'm sure that probably was a little bit of a surprise to you. But then you had the courage to also lead in that direction even further and say, well, if this is what they're telling us, let's go with that. And so kind of what's evolved out of that for you? Like, how did that shift the company or things that you were working on to be more focused on that deliberately?
I think it probably it allows us to be super humble when you're listening, be really curious. And, as leaders, we're taught to be big and strong and tall, be vulnerable. I'll give you an example. So right after that, we wrote our vision, and it was about a paragraph long. It was long, but it sounded great if you knew it. And we had somebody that was young in the organization, and she had the courage to walk up to me and say, I don't think I can pull that off. Like, I don't think I can say all that without a piece of paper in front of me. And she pointed to the wall and she said, but I see 3 words up there. I see empowering, healthier, living. Why don't you guys just change that whole paragraph to 3 words? And as a leader, like, no, we spent a lot of time on that. We dug into that and went home that night, came back the next day, and her name was Christina. I was like, hey, Christina, you know what? You had the courage to tell us. I'm going to tell you right now. I'm going to change the whole mindset. Our vision is empowering, healthier living. We're getting rid of all the other words. And
that's awesome.
That's where we are today.
Scott, I want to jump in here and ask a question. When you say, you got this feedback, they said, they answer, you call us back, you're responsive, and you started putting that into your culture. I'd like to just get a little bit tactical and ask you, how did you do that? How did you communicate that message back to your entire organization?
Yeah, so every week for 10 years, I've written a blog to the entire workforce on Friday. And now it's called 1 degree. So water boils at 211, or water is hot at 211, and it boils at 212. So 1 degree of separation. So, and the other reason why it's called 1 degree is I promised the video would be no longer than 212 seconds or no longer than 212 words. So in other words, we gave people a mindset. So once a week, we can lean into that and talk to that. When we bring new hires in, we talk to them about the number one priority is to be responsive back to people. So then we have to define what is being responsive.
Mm-hmm.
Being responsive is setting up expectations. So we live in a world where we think everything's urgent. If you can't define the difference between what's important and what's urgent, everything becomes urgent and nothing becomes important. And so we had to really kind of give them kind of a guidepost or an idea in regards to what's the difference between those two. And we just talk about that all the time, rinse and repeat. And, as a leader, when you get tired of talking about it, you're probably about a third of the way there. You're probably about a third of the way there.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Excellent. Well, it's interesting as we start talking about the employees. One of the things that I think I took away from our conversation was that the first customer for you is your employee. It just, to me, it's like you really know your employees. You really know what makes them tick. You really know if they're not the right person for the organization or the organization's not right for them. So talk a little bit more about your philosophy there. And then, like Betsy said, how do you put that into tactical practice of bringing the right people into the organization and maybe exiting those who aren't the right people?
Yes, we have a philosophy. We call them the 4 C's. So character, chemistry, collaboration, and competence. And so we'll have an interview process. It used to be just a few of us would interview people. And I'm a Pollyanna, so like I see the best in everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes if you're an extrovert like me, you fall in love with extroverts. Well, if you need a role, and it might be an introverted role, and it's not an expert that you're interviewing, I probably shouldn't be in the room. So we've got panel discussions and interview discussions with multiple people. So about 6 people in a room. We have questions that each panel member is going to ask in regards to character, chemistry, collaboration, and competence. And so we're asking them questions to try to drag that out of them. And we have review calls. We talk about the 4 C's. Are they going to fit? Do we make mistakes? All the time we make mistakes. But for the most part, what's really interesting, it's normally not leadership that has to ask that person to leave. It's normally their own staff, or it's the person saying, this is not the right place for me.
Interesting. That's just such a good process. And I think one of the things that you talked about was that it's really at the start of the process when you find out, how you're trying to bring in the right people, that it's really a hiring effort.
Versus, one cool thing that we do is, so when we, for example, we've got 3 people coming on Monday morning, is I'll call every new hire at home and welcome them aboard. We send flowers to their home, and we welcome them and the entire family in McGohan Brabender. So we want to get the spouse involved and the kids involved. And the phone calls what I make is, it's just pretty simple. It's, hey, thanks for trusting us. We're excited to have you on board. Do you have any questions? Here's my cell phone. Keep it. Do you have any questions about who we are? Can't wait to see you on Monday. And it takes 5 minutes out of your life. It's amazing. And it's not that complicated, and it's not that hard. I send a personal birthday card to 285 people every year with a handwritten note on the inside of it that goes right to their home with a gift card in the inside. And is it time consuming? Yes. But is it worth it? Oh my gosh, the thank you notes that come back. And, did you get a handwritten note in your mailbox at your house? We just don't get those very often.
Well, and what that creates in terms of loyalty and drive. Talk to us a little bit, since we're on this topic of your employees, talk to us a little bit about the way your physical building supports your commitment to your employees.
Yeah, so I'm a big believer in the 5 senses: what you can see, what you can hear, what you can feel, what you can touch, and ultimately what you can smell. I think people smell a motive is the first thing they can smell. And so we want them to walk in, we say families are number one value. There's 285 pictures on the wall as you walk in of families and kids and beaches and Disney World. It's like, okay, I guess they mean it. There's a toy closet for moms and dads when they bring their kids in, their kids can take a toy home. There's a victory card that when we celebrate something here, we put people on a cart, whether it be a wedding anniversary or we got a new customer or you passed the test. We have an immersion center, which is almost, think of it as like a living brochure where you walk in and I think we're really good at telling stories. People love listening to stories.
Absolutely.
And I think when you tell a compelling story, other people want to be a part of a story. Mm-hmm. So they want to be part of the next chapter. So how do I insert myself into this story? So as new hires come in, I'm a part of the story, and then they can be part of the new story. It doesn't take us a lot of time to do that. And it's really critical coming in, really important.
I can share the story of when I was in your building one time and your celebration cart. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it has like a siren and noisy and
a
bells and crazy. And it came up behind me. And I was like, what is happening? Because I did not know you did that. But boy, it made an impression on me because there were all these happy employees excited for this person. I think had just gotten a new client, and it was such a happy celebration for the company as well as the individual who was being celebrated. And it really made an impression on me, very memorable. So if it's memorable to somebody that walks into your building cold, I can imagine how memorable it is for your employees.
Oh, terrific.
Yeah.
I was impressed when you took us on the virtual tour the other day, walking through the offices and in your immersion room. It was just impressive to me because You're not giving us a tour today, and you might be listening to this. It was literally a museum quality display. I mean, there were boards on the walls that you could turn and you could see the storyline unfold, and there were phenomenal pictures. And then one of the things Betsy told me that I was going to see, and I had no visual image for it until we walked in the room, is the entire Healthcare Act standing, 7 or 8 feet tall on printed paper.
Oh yeah.
It's massive. And to see all that, it really just gave me this perspective of, wow, they know what they're doing. They really care about what they're doing. They care about the people, both your employees and your customers. But you made this a real living experience. Like if I had walked into a museum and seen that display, I would have stopped and read it and really thought through and said, wow, there's something important here about human benefits and the Healthcare Act, and that it really was an impressive display. And there's only one other company that I know that has done something like that, where they bring their employees and their clients in through a process like that. And I think it's phenomenal, especially in today's world where we're so focused on social media and everything being virtual. And, there's just like a real feel, touch, as you said, smell. It's like, what's happening right there.
So, Scott, we were talking about how in the throes of what we are just at the beginning of experiencing in a major transition in the way business is being done due to the coronavirus crisis, talking about your inside museum in your office, just how much maybe we don't appreciate those physical things until we no longer have them. So I believe you said there's just a couple of people in your office right now, and you've built so much importance into your physical environment. So talk to us a little bit about why you did that and what it feels like now with this change that we're going through at the moment.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, sometimes when you care a lot about culture, some people think culture is about profitability. Those people should never be in charge of culture because culture should never have anything to do with profitability. Culture is really all it is about love and empathy, and it's not that hard to love and be empathetic towards humanity. And it's amazing when you have a great culture and something really, really tough happens, then you get to see things come alive. And for example, we had a woman, she's gone through breast cancer 3 times, and she came in the office and she lost all her hair, and 2 people shaved their heads when she walked in the front door.
Wow.
And just kind of said, hey, it's okay.
Wow.
And those are really special moments to see. People don't do that stuff because they have to. They do it because they want to.
Yeah.
And then with the coronavirus and, making the decision to send, basically 255 people home and work remotely, some people had these questions, will they work? Will they get their work done? Everybody's going to have that question, but then to actually watch a workforce, to looking online and see how many email traffics are coming and how many is remotely. And, honestly, it takes your breath away. It's like they don't even have to be here and they care. We don't even have to be in front of them and they care. I think at the end of the day, we never did this to get paid back. But as a leader, you get to see the value in doing that. And you get to see, moms trying to be moms, dads trying to be dads, and people trying to be people, fighting the hard life, and just everyone trying to help each other, all because we cared for them in the first place. I'll never forget it. And I'm sure there's more decisions I've got to make in the next 72 hours, in the next 2 or 3 weeks. But, as far as getting paid back emotionally and spiritually, it's something I've never experienced. I've probably never been more proud of a workforce in my entire career.
That's a beautiful thing, especially in a time of just complete turbulence, to have that piece about your team.
Yeah.
And likewise, I'm sure they feel it coming to them, that I know I've got a great place that's supporting me as, as an employer, that's supporting me through this crisis as well. So hats off to you for building that kind of culture that allows for that.
Yeah. One of the things that really stood out to me too, as we were going through, and this relates to how you communicate with your employees, and even further, how you communicate to your clients and their employees, was the studio you have. I was actually shocked at the level of studio you have there, and you were telling stories about what you do in that studio. So share a couple stories about what this video studio is for, how you use it, and really why you have it in the first place, because it wouldn't seem like the type of thing a benefits company would have.
Yeah, I mean, we're pretty lucky too. I mean, we're in an industry that is in love with paper. I mean, I don't think there's an insurance broker or insurance company that's a member of the Audubon Society. And it's ancient and it's archaic, but we also know that if you're going to engage a workforce, it's not going to be through paper. It's just not. It's going to be through storytelling, and it's going to be through, we learn by reading, we learn by listening, we learn by experience. And we believe that, right now, communication through video is the most effective means of communication. Mm-hmm. So we have a podcast. Betsy has been on that podcast. We use that for a podcast studio. We have our employees tell a vision story. So what do I do what I do in less than 60 seconds? Nice. So people can go out and kind of watch that. And we'll do internal, communications with the, COVID-19 virus, when we met for 2 hours with our entire team and leadership team. And, people were starting to type things and put it in a mass communication. I'm like, hey, we've got this, let's just go talk with our hearts and do this live and throw this out to the workforce. And we'll figure out all the semantics and the words and the language later. It's a real luxury that we have that.
Yeah, it seems to me that just the way you talked about it there, you used the word vulnerable earlier. And I think to me, it really stands out as being able to get on camera. And I know how hard it is, because I've had to adapt to that, doing live videos and even recording in my business. I know Betsy and I have talked about that when we first started this podcast, about being in front of people, having these conversations. But there's this real vulnerability that you've got to have to be able to get on camera and open yourself up. And it's one thing to speak from a script. It's another thing to be willing to just speak from the heart and kind of get out of the head for a moment and into the heart, and let people feel that come through the video, through your voice, through your expressions. And it seems to me that, as we look at the future of the benefits industry, you alluded to it in our conversation of how it's shifting, and the studio is part of that front end for you, it really sounds like. And there's going to be this human to human connection through video, in 4 or 5 years, maybe through virtual reality, augmented reality. But it seems like you guys are on the front end of that, and you really understand what you have to do to get there. So talk us through a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think, right now is people, when they want to buy health insurance, when they need it. When they want to understand it, when they need it. And for some reason, us and even HR and companies will say, well, we're going to have an open enrollment meeting. That's not when people want to understand it. They want to understand it when they've got their kid in the back seat with that toothache and they're going to the dentist. That's when they want to know. So we want to make sure they've got, phone assistance. Hey, what do I do? An advocate. I have no idea what I'm doing here. And we also want to make sure they have on-demand learning. So how can I give them cues of information to educate them when they need it? Because you alluded to this, we believe that the long-term, the customer is actually going to be the employees of the workforce, not the CFO and human resources and the CEO. And I think the CEO and the CFO and HR, they want to invest the capital for employee benefit structure, but I'm not sure they want to invest the horsepower and kind of shutting the organization down to educate a workforce. Then the other thing they don't want to do is they don't want the responsibility for making the decision for everyone. Everyone has individual needs. I'm 55, I'm an empty nester. I don't need dependent child care.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need a flexible spending account. I don't need a lot of those things. But when we put everybody in a room, we've got to talk about everybody's situation. When we do it electronically through video, I can talk to a millennial. I can talk to someone in my generation. I can talk to single moms. I can talk to, young men. I mean, I have the ability to look at that through even generational segmentation in a completely different way.
I would add too, when we started this podcast, we decided to make it both audio and video. And when you have that ability to see somebody face to face and you get the real body language and the passion, and just speaking with you today about your team and how much that means to you, you could see it in your face. And for those of you that are just listening to the audio, I would highly recommend going out to YouTube and watching this interview as well. You just get a different perspective when you're having this face-to-face conversation. And video is definitely the play moving forward. And I would also say, Scott, I know you're very active on LinkedIn and you do a lot of videos on LinkedIn. And I think that's so engaging as well. And there's so many ways that you can put your message out there in video, internally, externally, social media, all different kinds of ways.
Mm-hmm. And you alluded to too, when you speak from here, you don't need a script. You just don't.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Scott, I know you're highly involved in the community and have some passion projects and things that you're very putting a lot of your spare time and energy into. So talk to us about the things that really matter to you on a personal level and in terms of community give back.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. Number one is an inner city program that I've run for 13 years called Mentors Matter. So connect about 20 inner city students over an 8-week program over the summer. And I connect local CEOs with inner city high school students. And we just smash together as like grapes. And we just kind of get to understand what we're all about. And we talk about life. I want people of different races, different genders, different ethnic backgrounds, different maybe religious structure, or different socioeconomic issues to understand that there are 55-year-old white guys that love them, that care about them, and I want to lean into them in a different way and let them know that there's opportunities out there. And although we might look different, the fact that we're available to help them today, and it's been a blast. What's awesome. Funny is the students. I think they enjoy it, but I tell you what, the mentors, I think, walk out of there completely different people than. I'm really involved in a church we go to. It's a non-denominational. You wear sandals. It's casual. It's a cool place. It's called Southbrook. Leadership's really important. So we started a monthly leadership session called Provoke, where we're focusing in on really emotional intelligence, which I don't think, you talk about robotics and AI and a lot of different things that are happening going to happen in our careers that are going to replace a lot of jobs. I'm not sure emotional intelligence can be replaced, and it's really important today to teach people the assets of that. And when you have those assets as a leader, nobody can take that away from you. Nobody can take that away from you. So that's really important to me too.
I think that's such a key point too. I mean, that is such. I know with people that I've hired in the past, if I can see that EQ out of the gate, I'm thinking I can teach them the skills, and I know there's a lot of nurturing and mentoring you can do to teach some EQ, but some people just have it. And that really, really helps.
For your listeners too, I'll give you a piece of advice. So after we interview somebody, the first person we go to is Kathy at the front desk. Say, what'd you think of so-and-so? She goes, who? It's like, oh, that's not good.
Yeah.
Not sure about that. But
that's
it's the first one we go to is we just kind of go to her and say, what do you think? Like, handshake, eye contact, smile. How did they sit? Did they ask you to be seated? How did they hold themselves? all those little nonverbal cues, when they're not in front of a leader, are really, really important.
That is a great piece of advice. Very good. Well, Scott, we have come to the end of our time today, but we thank you so much for being here. We know that life is probably very, very busy for you. And so we greatly appreciate you taking the time. And you've given our audience just some really valuable, important leadership lessons and human being lessons. And so we just really want to tell you how much we appreciate your time here today.
Thanks for having me.
It's been great.
I really appreciate it. And hey, thanks for everything you're doing. We're all just trying to do the good, the right stuff for the right people for the right reasons. So, grateful.
Scott, where can people find you if they want to learn more about you and get to know you a little bit? How can people reach out to you?
Yeah, it's a miserable email. So it's psmcgohan@mcgohanbrabender.com. That's way too long. And I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram, and then also on Facebook under Scott McGohan. Or you can just reach out and call.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again for being here, Scott. And we hope to chat again with you soon.
Excellent. Well, thanks for having me.
Wow. I mean, that's about all I can say at the moment. Scott is a fantastic person. Just his heart, his brilliance. One of the things that struck me, one of the phrases he said several times during that, I'd like to go back and actually count it. He said, "It's not that complicated."
Right.
And to me, that statement just shows that how he has just simplified and really broken down what it takes to run his business, what it takes to have good relationships with his customers and his employees. And yeah, that statement there, "It's not that complicated," just really stands out to me.
And you know what's funny about that? He's in a very complicated business. He's in healthcare benefits. I don't know how much more complicated it gets. And so it's so refreshing to see a leader that just boils it all down to the things that matter most. And I think it is. It's just such a sign of brilliant leadership. Yeah. The way he runs the company, and his passion shows through so much for his people, for his customers, for their families. And I just think it's just such a shining example of what we should all aspire to be as leaders.
Absolutely. And what I really enjoyed about the conversation we had with him, actually both conversations, is that he's bringing to light, I think, in this world where we're so digitally connected, how important it is to use technology and the environment of the office there, all of this, to support human connection rather than to replace human connection. And, with his employees and how they do these videos, and he's got this 212-word blog post. I mean,
that was cool. That was
really
exactly cool.
And so he's finding ways to leverage technology to enhance relationships, to make deeper relationships, as opposed to this idea of how do I disconnect from people by using technology.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's honestly the holy grail of how it should be, using technology to enhance rather than replace.
Yeah, a couple of things that stand out in that realm is the videos he talked about, how they can personalize the videos to a particular person's situation, whether it's a millennial, a single mom, whatever else, speaking to the specific challenge in healthcare that they may be trying to research at that moment. So it's on demand, it's where they need it, when they need it, what they need to know. And that there is self-service. But because they do it through video and you have this human heart-to-heart connection, eye-to-eye connection, it really is as good as, or maybe better than in some cases, that I've got to pick up the phone, call someone, wait for them to answer, then be transferred to 3 different people. So I love that he's leveraging the human relationship and human connection within self-service. That's one of the things I really believe we've got to do far more of, instead of just the self-service where it's us and a machine.
Absolutely. That's the bottom line right there. So, hey, thanks everybody for being here for another episode of the Really Know Your Customer podcast. We're so glad you were here with us today. And we'd really like to encourage you to think about something that you can take from what you heard here today with Scott McGohan and implement it into your business to really help excel your organization and your success. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Really Know Your Customer. We hope you gained a lot of value from being here today. If you want to learn more about the work Betsy and Tony do to help their clients thrive, visit Betsy at thecongruitygroup.com and Tony at tonybodoh.com. See you next time on the Really Know Your Customer Show.